Good evening and welcome back to the Imaginary Gallery. It is TJ, your host. Tonight's discussion is how to recognize the devaluation phase as it's happening. Assuming you've become involved with Cluster B Narcissistic Monster Creature, the story would have began with the idealization phase, which can sometimes occur if you've just recently escaped from a toxic relationship. Many times we will feel numb, and if somebody comes along and is pressuring us to hang out with them, to go on a date with them, or whatever they do, we might be tempted to, in our misery from the previous circumstance, think, well, why not? And typically in this phase of idealization, you may feel a little guilt to yourself because you see this other person putting forth all this effort to do any and everything you want, and you think to yourself, I wouldn't do that to somebody. We barely know each other. And then you might feel spoiled, like, well, this person must be different from the others. Oh, okay, and we might go along with it. But keep in mind, this idealization, regardless of the circumstance, sets the stage for the next stage, which is the devaluation. Regardless of the beginning circumstances, you'll go through the love bomb, all of the flattery and the pedestal putting. Well, it's only a matter of time before this devaluation appears. And it can be compared to that of a frog. The frog being put in the pot of water that's just slightly warm, as opposed to a frog put into a boiling pot of water where it jumps out. In this warm water, it stays put, and as time passes, eventually the temperature gets turned up just a little, but many times we don't recognize this because it's so slow. But typically the devaluation phase doesn't begin until the narcissistic creature senses that you are falling for it, or that you've allowed yourself to hook into its life. Things are no longer just superficial, where you could easily just say, forget it and be gone. Typically, this occurs after you've spent quite a lot of time together, and you've intertwined your finances or emotional behaviors, or you've made things permanent through a mortgage, or you borrowed a large sum of money from the person, or you lent a large sum of money to the person. But once they detect that you're fallen head over heels for them, that's when the devaluation occurs. And it's, again, very slow. Everybody loves that idealization phase because it feels so good. It feels like somebody really understands and gets us, and they really want to be with us. The more we show of ourselves, the more they're there, and we just assume that, wow, this person and I are really a good match. Once you've reached that point of the love where they know they've got you, they will begin devaluation, which may start in little slight ways, such as things you've done from day one all of a sudden will be a problem for this person, even though in the beginning it probably praised you for them, but now it's complaining about them. Maybe even subtly, indirectly, without drawing too much attention, just enough to give you the thought that, wow, this is so great. Oh, it's not happy with this. Oh, maybe I should not do this, or something. They want you to question your own values and stop some of them for its benefit without directly saying it. Plus, the boundaries you may have set, they do not like boundaries. They want to extinguish all boundaries and will try many creative ways to do so. The problem is, though, once you've been around such a person for a long period of time, you may start to notice inconsistencies in its behavior, or comparing its words to its action, or both. Typically, a devaluation can begin from the moment you start to recognize such discrepancies, or when you are used to hearing, for example, the person saying something about themselves repeatedly. Oh, I'm this way, I'm this way, I'm this way, and then you notice something that's the opposite way. The moment you speak up and say, are you sure you're really this way? Because I couldn't help but notice you were behaving in the opposite way in this situation. And you will quickly be told, oh, you're wrong, I only did that because of, insert retarded excuse here. But the moment you start to get onto them and realize this person isn't exactly as I thought, that's when devaluation many times can occur. Because these creatures have no clue what reality is. They live in their fake fantasy world. They've got you there to gain supply from, and you're not supposed to have a mind of your own. You're not supposed to understand what they're doing, and how dare you ever try to guess what they're really doing if it differs from the fake image they're presenting to you. But they don't understand the simple concept of cause and effect. You see, they're not a real person. They are coming to you pretending to be what they think you want, which isn't normal in real relationships. And they scam you, and if you start to catch on to the scam and even point it out, you will be ridiculed. You will be told, oh, you are wrong. And that is gaslighting for you, because you might be thinking to yourself, I think this person's faking. I'm going to go ahead and say it. And then when they give that reaction, you think, well, that's not the reaction I expected. I expected the person to fess up, and guess what? They don't. They would rather say that you are imbalanced and off than admit the truth. But these people are seeing you as an object. You're an object that gives them supply. And if you become too intelligent for your britches, then they will have no use for you, because they need someone they can control. They need someone they can lavish all these gifts and compliments and attention to, and expect the other person to ask no questions, to not doubt anything that it says. And if you're an intelligent thinking person, you won't be able to help but notice that, yeah, these things were great, but this thing isn't. And you'll get nowhere if you try to discuss that one thing that isn't, because they cannot dare face their own self-loathing, they cannot face their own dependence on you, and they can't bear to face their own feelings of inferiority, which of course will not be shown to you. Because the problem is, these types of creatures lack the ability to be self-aware. Like many of us can do a certain thing that's not very productive, and then look at it, draw attention to it, and laugh about it. You won't see this in the narcissistic creature. They can never present themselves as anything less than perfection, even though it's fake. When you start to chip away at their fake facade and say, you know what, I've noticed that you always say that you're this specific way, but I can name 10 examples of where you're actually the opposite, they don't want to hear such things. They will talk you out of whatever you've said and claim, oh, you're imagining things. Oh, that's not the way it is. The problem, too, is you can never really satisfy this type of person. They're always looking for the next source of supply the moment you start to falter, if not prior to that, because they probably unconsciously realize they're never going to really find what they're looking for, because they can't be real. They can only present themselves as a fake image of a real person. Plus, they probably chose you because you may be a generous, forgiving, compassionate person, things of which they know nothing about, but they do know that they can manipulate people with such characteristics. So that's probably why they chose you, despite all of their fictitious mirroring of you to act like they're the same way, which, you know, being that way and seeing the way they behave and how they quickly switch to something different, you'd think, okay, well, I know what it's like to be compassionate, and that is not the way a compassionate person is. But they'll, of course, claim to be, and you'll see through it. And if you try to mention this and say, you're not compassionate, because if you were, you wouldn't have done this, and you'll be given a gaslighting response, I am compassionate, I only did what I did there because, and it's fake. But they love to prey upon these characteristics that you have, because they can do what they do, pretend to be in love, and then you find out something they've done that indicates a lack of love, and they'll exploit your characteristics of compassion and forgiveness and generosity by expecting you to forgive them, and then probably throw in some kind of pity play detail that basically says, well, I didn't have a life like yours. I went through this, and that's why I acted like that. And you're supposed to use your compassion to think, oh, well, maybe I'm being too hard on this creature. No, you're not. But in my own experience, I've noticed that typically the devaluation occurs once you start to figure out what's going on, because you know in the beginning they're perfect. Anything you suggest is done. It doesn't even seem real because you'd expect there to be some kind of objection to at least something you suggest, but instead they say things like, as long as I get to be with you, that's all that matters, which is phony. People that are real don't say such things. And many times what they'll do is, once you start to suspect them of not being genuine and then bringing up specific instances that support your position, they'll of course discredit all of them, gaslight, tell you that you're thinking too much. But they will use this in many cases against you. They will in fact make it out like from the moment you started questioning them and pointing out inconsistencies and they stop giving you so much attention and you may ask what's wrong, they will blame you. The truth is, you're figuring them out. They can't control you if you figure them out, and they try to steer you back on course of their fake persona. But if you insist and say, wait though, I did see this and it does mean that something's not right, they will not want to hear it. They may even raise their voice and say, everybody has problems. What are you yelling at me for this for? What about the time you did whatever? And it doesn't do any good for the conversation because you're trying to get the person to at least come in line with the facts and say, look, tell me you're a compassionate person, but you did these 10 things that were not compassionate. Why don't you just update yourself and say, okay, I usually am compassionate, but in certain circumstances I'm not. But no, they won't do that. They will not bend to your will. They love to credit you with the demise of the relationship, when the fact is you've simply learned enough about them to realize they're not who they say they are, and they typically don't like that. They want you to just accept what they say without question, because remember, you don't have a mind. You're not a separate person. You are an extension of them. They want to be with you in public to make it look like they've made it in life because they've got a partner, but you're not supposed to think independently. You're supposed to go along with whatever they say, and unfortunately that's a fantasy world and does not last if you're a real person involved with such a creature. Another thing to keep in mind, I've seen where I've been with such a creature and noticed and even brought up the fact that, you know what, since day one, I haven't changed a thing about who I am. I didn't pretend to be this and then became that. I didn't act like I believe this way, but then later you saw I believe that way. But you have changed, all that stuff. Well, typically they will try to blame this on you, which you have to step back for a moment and realize that this person was alive before you met them. This person presented themselves to you in a specific way, which was great at first, but then this person did an about-face and became a completely opposite type of person, none of which has anything to do with you, despite what they'll say. I've had a few that will say, well, it's because of you that I stopped being so nice. And I thought back and thought, wait a second, you were nice before I knew what was going on. It's only when I started to catch on to what was going on and started to question that your niceness waned. So don't let them accuse you of changing them, because you didn't. Especially if you're still the same person you always were. But they will try any and every tactic to discredit anything you say, which is not a loving person, clearly. And as long as you know that there's no way you ever could have satisfied it, you'll be better off, and hopefully it's far behind you, because these creatures are simply parasites. They're looking for someone to be their victim. They're looking for a host to suck the life out of. And if you've been devalued by one and you notice the other characteristics involved, you may just withdraw. Just don't have any contact with them. And of course, if you do that, they'll probably try to pull you back in, because this frog analogy with the water getting hotter and hotter, if they don't have a new source of supply yet, and you start to realize what's going on and start to step away, they will throw in some breadcrumbs of the love bombing phase to yank you right back in, because you'll ask things like, how come you never do this anymore? And they'll keep that stuff in mind, and then they'll do that stuff anymore once they realize you're about to jump ship, because they want to keep you in this as long as possible before the final discard. Well, if you notice or recognize these types of behaviors, it's in your best interest to do the discard yourself, and it's best to do it without any explanation. Because if you do give an explanation, chances are this creature will simply try to discredit whatever that objection is and tell you how you're wrong, bring up something sweet from the olden days that'll lure you back into their game, and hopefully at this point it won't work. Don't let it.
I am the Narcopath. I've got a little secret for you. It's one of my secrets to success. Since I'm giving you all these confessions, figured I might as well give this one.
I know, from what I heard through the grapevine, you had such a horrible time after you realized I had left you, or, as the books I've been reading say, discarded you. I like that better anyway. You were just devastated. You said so many things to me that I wrote them down because I'd never think to say such things, but I'm going to use them next time someone tries to dump me when they figure me out. But I've learned there's something called first impressions. I know first impressions can be very strong, so I use that to my advantage. Remember, when we first met, I was agreeable to anything and everything as long as you wanted to do it. I went along your sickening country music concerts that I pretended to like, and even bought those cowboy boots. Well, I stole them, but stole those cowboy boots just so I'd look like I fit in. And all the other things I did for you, like doing your dishes every night. I know you didn't ask me to, but it's part of the game I played, because I knew how much you hated to do dishes, so I figured, well, I'll show you. I'll do them for you. Because my goal was to try to show you that your life is nothing without me. Meaning, anything I could sense that you needed done or wanted done, before you could snap your fingers, I had it done. Because like I said, first impression. I did so much for you in those first few weeks. I did things your own family wouldn't do for you. And it was for a reason. You questioned sometimes if I was really wanting to do all that for you, and the answer was, yes, this is just who I am. Which was a lie, but it got me through. I was exhausting myself. Of course, I'd never show it. I had to come on strong. Because I know how the people are of today. They don't care about anybody else, just like I don't care about anybody else. But I needed something out of you. You had the money. You had the home. I was homeless. You were the one. I just pretended to be like you for as long as I could. And I know sometimes I can get a long time to do that. I'm a master at manipulation. So when you caught on to the fact that I couldn't stand country music and found out that I was just doing all that for you, you tried to accuse me of being a fake. And I just said, oh, honey, that's silly. I wanted to learn to listen to the music. I wanted to like it because you did. And I gave you stupid excuses. And evidently you bought them because you sure kept me around for a while.
Ooh, baby. My new love is up. Are you free? I was thinking about you. Don't tell anyone. Ooh, I was just thinking about the way we used to do things together. Ooh, oh.